Well, I'm talking about anybody who that does a lecture. Like, okay, Bob Cassidy for one.
Cassidy went on there and he started, cursing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they edited it out?
Yeah, or at least they tried their best.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, Watkins is a mentalist from New York City, or at least currently living in New York City. Where are you from, by the way?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's right. So currently from New York City, and he's recently put out actually 2 full-length books on mentalism, full of, just jam-packed full of really cool, crazy, interesting ideas, new perspectives on things. One of them is called Jhana, Jhana, is that right? And then one of them is called Positive Negative. But before we get into any of that material, why don't you tell us a little bit about... Here, I'll keep talking so you can have a little
Oh,
baby.
no.
Oh, you're good. All right.
I can totally talk and do this at the same time.
Oh, wow.
It's an art form.
Like chewing bubble gum.
Yep.
He's vaping, by the way, in my
Yep.
apartment. He's vaping. So Watkins, tell us a little bit about how you got into mentalism.
How I got into mentalism? Yeah. Whenever I was a kid, 7 years old about, my mom was friends with a lot of sideshow performers. One in particular, his name was Crispy. It was a Crispy Family Carnival. And so I was interested in that sort of weird shit, like sword swallowing, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's, I guess, what I kind of initially wanted to do, like hypnosis, that sort of thing. But then I realized that I was too much of a coward to try sword swallowing stuff. So I started getting more into magic than I would any of the sideshow sort of deal. And then I saw David Blaine when he came on, and then that was it. Just like a lot of other people, I think David Blaine's first special, like, really, really got me into doing magic in a more realistic way. Not the, not so much into the Copperfield stuff whenever I was a kid. Not the big, or even Lance Burton. To this day, I don't really think I'm very knowledgeable about big stage illusions and stuff,
Sure.
So it's not a big deal. I got into it that way. Started doing mentalism a little bit after that. And I think that what got me into mentalism specifically was, and I didn't realize it was Uri Geller until, like, kind of recently, that it was him that did this. But I remember I was in my house whenever I was a kid, and he had a TV show on where he had all these watches, and he had everybody in the audience take out these, like, find a watch or a clock that doesn't work, is what he told the people watching at home. He would say, when we get back from the break, you should have a spoon and a clock or a watch that doesn't work anymore, and bring it over to the TV. So then the commercial's going on. I told my stepmom, I was like, we got to get this, get a clock that doesn't work. And she's like, I got one. She had this little clock that looked like a little desk chair. It was like a gold little tiny desk chair kind of clock thing, and it did not tick. It didn't move. It was just, fucked, right? So, so I was like, okay, so I got it. And whenever the TV show comes back on, this guy, who, like I said recently, I figured out was Uri Geller, he told everybody in the audience and everybody at home to count to 3 and say work. And we did that 3 times. And I swear to God, the thing started ticking again. My stepmom and my entire family was freaking out, like really big. And so that was like, whoa, this is real. And to this day, I still don't know how that happened. No idea. But that was the thing that got me more interested in that kind of magic. Because I was already doing magic during that kind of
like card magic.
Yeah, and then I was like, whoa, this is not magic. This is something else.
This is not quite rubber bands.
So that's what got me into that stuff. I like more realistic.
Yeah, I think that's done. I mean, I've heard the stories of that trick, and I've never done it myself, but I think there's just some percentage
of clocks that work whenever you say.
Well, no, yeah, when you say, they're all voice activated.
I think James Randi was thinking that there's something about, like, because maybe I'm misremembering the fact that when you say work, he might have had you shake it, or like work, do this motion.
Oh,
that
maybe.
might have kicked something in.
Maybe.
And then if it didn't, I wouldn't have known anyway. It was a TV show. Only remember if it works.
Yeah, I seem to remember something about the heat as well, like just the heat. It's been in the drawer for years, but all of a sudden you're bringing it up to body temperature.
Yeah. All I know is what kind of genius thinks of stuff like that.
Right.
And can perform that like that, because literally, like, that freaked my stepmom out so bad. And me being a kid, seeing my elder, like my family members freaking out, I was like, yo, this is the real deal.
Yeah.
You know?
But yeah, so you were into David Blaine, and obviously that's a big deal, because that was I mean, that was revolutionary in and of itself, you know, Spike Lee deciding to turn the camera around on the audience, you know, and I can totally see, I think that had an effect on me as well around that time because, you know, you're looking at the magic for every other special, and you say, okay, well, that's cool, I don't know how that works, but then, like, you turn the camera around, you know, and it doesn't really matter if you have an idea of what Blaine was doing or not, but just in that moment when you see those people like freak out and run across the street and run in circles and say he's a wizard, he's a wizard, he's a wizard, or whatever they're doing, you know, I can't think of any young person that I know who wouldn't want that ability, right? So what a way to like nail in the coffin to really solidify an interest in magic. And
it's suggestion, because it also makes it look a lot more credible, because when you see other people freaking out, it's reinforcement. You know, when you see those people freaking out, you like have that empathy, or like the audience watching on TV has more of an empathy with those people that just saw the magic trick or whatever it was.
Absolutely.
Into thinking it's real, because I remember my parents thought that David Blaine was real too whenever his first show came on. Nowadays when you look, it's just a bunch of card tricks and, you know, like basic stuff.
Good.
It makes you wonder why nobody before thought about doing a TV special like that. Like now, I couldn't imagine doing a magic show on TV without it being like that.
For some reason, people just thought the magic was the interesting part, which it is for the layperson. I mean, I understand the perspective, but like, it's kind of strange to think that it happened so quick. You know, I mean, at the same time, you know, you wonder why it took so long for somebody to turn the camera around. One might wonder justifiably why it happened so fast. I mean, it was a genius move even at the time.
Yeah.
Because why should you look at the audience?
Well,
you are the audience. You're the audience at home watching the magic trick. Why should you turn the camera around? Who cares?
But here's why I say that, is because all of my friends, or the people I hang out with a lot who are lay people, they always say, man, the reason I like watching you do your stuff is because I like to watch people freak out. They say, I love seeing those people. They love that too, you know, and it's like they intuitively understood that way before magicians did, I guess.
Sure.
You know, they know what they like to see.
Okay.
You know.
So, how do you like my desk, my studio?
It's pretty cool.
It's cool. We got our trinkets. We got our cards. We got our Rubik's Cube. We got mugs. Oh, join or die.
Oh yeah.
I gave that one to you on purpose.
Maybe I should put this on the.
I don't know.
What do you think does more damage to the table?
I don't know. You take your pick. It's
this one has more condensation
routine.
on it.
More condensation. There's a condescension joke in there somewhere. So you were telling us about your upbringing in magic, and we got my little Timo mushroom. For those who know. And you noticed this book, but I don't remember what the context was. So
I was talking about my mom's friend who was the sideshow guy. That's one of the first books he gave me, like whenever I was a kid. I don't know exactly how old that book may be, but from what I remember, it was whenever I was a kid. I must have been in like elementary school or something. That was one of the first magic books, and I was like, whoa, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, so Kaufman and Company put this out. I actually bought this very recently at Magic Live. I have no idea what's in this book, because
it's really
still
cool.
Plastic sealed for me, but it's called the Swami Mantra, and I know that on the back, this is really cool. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'll read it to you. This book is not to be sold to anyone under 21 years of age for any reason.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that sounds very irresponsible for him to give you this book.
Yes, it was that book. Yeah, I know, right? That book and then Snake Oil by Jim Rose. Those were the two books that I read when I was a kid the most.
Jim Rose. He's like the carnival marketing guy, right?
No, yeah, and he was also, you know, a freak himself.
Right.
You know, he did some crazy shit, man. But that Snake Oil was a really cool book, and I want to find it again because I hadn't read it since I was a kid, but it had, you know, cons in it, you know, all kinds of ways of scamming people, fucking people over, and just little ways to make money on the street. Like, there was one little section in there where he says to get a yardstick and go underneath a vending machine and scrape out all the money that may have fallen over the years, you know, underneath, like all the coins that could have rolled under there. He says that's how you can get yourself something out of a vending machine really quick.
Wow,
you know?
So you get yourself like $3 or $4 from underneath.
Or whatever. He says it depends on how long it's been there. You know, sometimes you can find all kinds of shit. But yeah,
that's
they
so
also,
funny.
and I might be really misremembering this, but it's either that book or the Jim Rose book. But one of them had this pulse stop thing. It's not a stop, but it's a slow. Like you slow your pulse down, and you do it by having some like laundry soap, like a quarter size of laundry soap that you ingest, and it's really bad for you. And I think that might be in that book, and that's why it was one of the, like, not for 21 and over, because it had all of these weird, like bodily things that you do that are kind of dangerous.
They suggest you ingest laundry soap to slow your pulse?
Because then you're doing it for real, because it really does. Yeah, so it's really crazy stuff in there. But
you can raise your pulse by slitting your own throat.
Right, yeah.
Like, that's another great method, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could stop your pulse by dying.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
another
recommend anybody does it, but it's a cool book because that's what I think is the theme of that book, is like it's supposed to be about how, like, these like old-timey crazy tricks were done back in the day.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think that's what Kaufman was telling me over at Magic Live, was that it's it's just full of these just layers upon layers of weird methods and weird plots and all of that stuff. So hey, speaking of weird methods and weird plots, right? Now might be a good time to get into your books, because your work is full of this kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about Jhana first, because I read Positive Negative, but I haven't read Jhana.
Yeah, that one's the title is from basically that's like the oldest form of the Buddhist meditation. That's what they used to call it. That's the other word for it, is jhana. That's what, and there's like different levels of it. Like, so basically, like, if you get to the first level, these are like different altered states of consciousness, basically, that you do yourself, without any drugs or anything. Like, they would do this while they're meditating. And there's like, they say, apparently, when you get to this certain level, that you attain psychic powers. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Another little bit of trivia.
It's a little like Scientology.
It kind of, Scientology is a little bit like that.
Yeah,
that's what I say.
The other way around, sure.
Yeah, dude, we could talk about Scientology all day, because I got some crazy shit about that. But anyway,
put that in the notes.
Yeah. But
go
here's
on,
some cool trivia about the title Jhana that people probably don't know, is that Jhana was mispronounced by the Chinese, who called it Chan, right? And then that was mispronounced by the Japanese that called it Zen. That's how that school of Buddhism spread further towards the east, is from a misrepresentation or mispronunciation of a mispronunciation of that meditative state or whatever. So that's just a little trivia of that title. But anyway, so yeah, I thought that was a cool title. That's why it's got a Buddha on the face of it. And I was kind of like thinking of, mentalism premises that would be kind of about that sort of thing. So it has kind of like a really mystical, that book has a lot of mystical stuff. So it's not realistic mentalism, really.
Okay.
More like bizarre magic sort of thing.
So can you give us an example of something that's in the book?
Yeah, like there's the very first one in there. I call it Divine Moment of Truth. And that one is basically where you write down the secrets of the universe on a piece of paper and show it to somebody, and they have some sort of freak out or some epiphany or some sort of realization. And that's what it seems, obviously. And that one, what's funny about that one is I when I was sending it to some other bigger name mentalists so they can watch the video, I had a couple of them reply back to me, and they were saying, what is I don't see an effect, I just see a reveal. And I'm like, yeah, that's the effect. It's not supposed to look like any kind of process or anything. And so it is basically just a reveal, but it's about how you build it up. And as far as the audience is concerned, it's just a reveal too. But isn't that what mentalism is supposed to look like?
Well,
I mean,
their
sometimes.
complaint was that it was...
Yeah, they said it's not an effect. It's just you're just revealing something. I didn't see the whole performance. And I'm like, that's the idea behind it, is that there is nothing else before it. It looks like you can walk up to somebody. Remember, looks like. You can walk up to somebody, pull out a piece of paper, show them something, and they freak out. That's the effect itself.
Oh, right. So in the effect, you're not explicitly saying these are the secrets of the universe.
Oh, no, you can say that, but I'm saying there is no process. It's not a revelation of thought of piece of information as far as the audience is concerned, right?
Sure, okay. Now, you say as far as the audience is concerned, which leads me to believe that there's a little bit of dual reality in there somewhere, which I imagine, since you don't probably really know the secrets of the universe, there may very well be.
Yeah, well, yes, and that's like I was getting back to when I was writing this book, and I had that title of this Buddhist stuff in mind. is I was trying to make an effect that would look like you could get somebody to a state of spiritual enlightenment as an effect, as a mentalism trick in itself. And I thought that was an interesting premise that I don't think anybody else has really done. Now, I know Peter Turner has something that he called Fortune Cookie, which is kind of similar, where he'll write down a message that will be important to their future, and they take the piece of paper with them and they go on about their day. And then they aren't supposed to open it until they feel right. And I'm like, that's cool, but I wanted something that was like a completely different premise. That's why I put Secrets of the Universe into the scripting, like as if I am giving them spiritual enlightenment. That's what I mean by this is really mystical style stuff. Right? And, so that's basically that's just an example of one of those out of that book.
Okay, so, but it's all, when you're writing Jhana, are you thinking to yourself, are you thinking based on sort of premises and then how to get to that spot versus?
Yeah, it's not really to me, it's not a methodological book. Like, you're going to find some things that are different methods or different ways of doing methods in there, but it's the premises what I really am interested in. That's why I'd like to eventually just get into consulting, because that's the stuff I like the most, is coming up with unique premise for a mentalism show, really. All right.
So, I mean, speaking of that, we're probably gonna get into that too, because I know you're working on a new show, and the new show is it sounds similar.
Did you read the whole thing?
No,
yet,
I only read the first effect.
Okay, well, what did you think about that?
I thought it's really cool. I mean, there are pieces that I personally might change, and we won't get too deep into this because this is all right now still being worked on and stuff, but basically, yeah, I mean, it as for what I know about you, it's very reflective of your interests,
right?
And I'd like to talk about those as well, but let's wrap up Jhana first.
Yeah.
Jhana's, I didn't read it, but you've given an example from it, and so it sounds interesting, right? It sounds great, sounds very cool. I read Positive Negative, but if you want to wrap up Jhana just so people can get an idea of what it's about.
Like I say, Jhana is basically, it's the same. I feel like it's very similar to Positive Negative. It just has a little bit less stuff, and it has a different overall theme to it. Because I like books that, or at least mentalism books that have like a motif or something throughout it. And the one for that one is sort of Buddhist-esque like type of material. And for one more example is, Here's something interesting. This is something that I always think of, but I don't see anybody else doing it. A lot of hypnosis tricks or real hypnosis, they'll have somebody forget their name, right? But my whole idea was like, if you look into philosophy, which is what I think is like one of the best ways to come up with mentalism premises, is like, look at ancient philosophy especially. In the Buddhist religion, they teach like their doctrine of no self, like that the self is an illusion. Why don't you talk about that when you make somebody forget their name? Like as if you're literally taking their self away from them, or that they're realizing this ego death sort of thing. Or at least hint at it. Just because then it becomes more of a mystical thing, but I know that's not everybody's approach.
Are you saying to like to sort of bring to reality the terror of that situation?
Not necessarily the terror, because, I mean, you can interpret that in that way, too, but I'm talking from the Buddhist angle, which is what I thought, like, with that book, I wanted to have it like a Buddhistic type of theme.
Okay.
It's almost like you're making their doctrines a reality using the tricks.
Right, okay.
Right.
Yeah. So what makes this different, and this is a weird... There's a weird thing comes to mind, but maybe this is on the minds of some of the listeners as well. What makes this kind of magic, which sounds story-driven in a sense, almost narrative-driven. It sounds like it's almost proving a point. Is this bordering in the same place as, like, it's obviously bizarre, but what makes this kind of bizarre magic or this strain any different from, say other kind of narrative magic, like magic that's metaphor or magic or gospel magic, or any kind of like that?
Well, it is the same in the respect of if it's trying to give a message. I mean, yeah, it's definitely the same. but I feel like it's more personal to me, and maybe it can relate to a lot of other performers out there that maybe don't have that outlet, or maybe they don't think that they have the creativity to come up with their own ways of preaching their thing. But I like to think if there's somebody else that thinks like me and is interested in those sorts of things, here's some tricks that are based off of that way of thinking. You know, now whether you think it's ethical to put out your own messages, I mean, that's for each individual to figure out for themselves.
Isn't that what art is for?
Yeah, right.
Sense,
It's to talk about bigger ideas, and I think that's the thing. That's what I was talking about with the whole name amnesia deal and the Buddhist idea of not self or egolessness, right? Is that, and I'm not saying I'm a Buddhist either. I just think it's interesting shit.
Right.
But if you are going to make somebody forget their name, that's already amazing in and of itself. But if you want to talk about bigger ideas, and if you are interested in the Buddhist religion and philosophy, then wouldn't it be cool to at least hint at that with your scripting? You know, with your screen, just hint at the idea that you're going to give this person a little tiny glimpse or an insight into what it's like to realize that the self is an illusion.
Right.
Or that your identity is a hallucination in some way. But then you bring it back, because, they're going to remember their name again. But it's almost like taking just the name and making it a lot bigger for free, making it more for free.
Right.
Because they didn't really forget who they were. They just forgot the name. But that's like an extra layer of deception on top of it. Or at least just trying to get more out of that one little thing.
Yeah, I have a similar plot, and we've discussed this before, but just to bring this to the audience, I have a similar plot, or a similar situation with a routine that I do about free will, which I basically ripped off a lot of the scripting from Sam Harris's work on the subject.
And that's cool, too.
And, I mean, we've spoken about some of your influences and looking into different philosophers and finding different things. Or different, neat ideas from which to base a routine or a show. But the problem that I always run into is that, the relationship between us and the audience is very different than other artists because we are necessarily demonstrating a skill. And so the art of music, for instance, you can experience a musician. Our relationship to an audience is very similar to that of a musician or a comedian, not an actor. One who is very clearly demonstrating something that is, they're sort of crafting a world which we all implicitly know is not a real world, right? And it may be a reflection of the real world. It may not be. Many times a play is a reflection of the real world, but the audience is completely aware it's not a play, regardless of how they're reacting to it, or completely aware that it's not real, regardless of how they're acting to it in the moment. So when it comes to magic, I think we're much more like comedians or like musicians or jugglers even, because, that's where this all comes from, but that's our relationship. And when we go to inject meaning or art into it, I wonder if it doesn't muddy it in a way. Like a musician is obviously telling a story, but a magician, it seems like we get this, or a mentalist anyway, because magicians, they are a similar relationship. I don't think you need to. I mean, the contract is very different. You know what I mean? I don't think an audience is really thinking that ball is flying of its own accord or whatever. Maybe they are. I don't know, but. Where was I? God, I was
You're talking about whether or not those narratives like muddy the.
Yeah. So it's like I'm going to do this thing that's really incredible, right? Now, I'm going to make a person forget their name. Oh, for me, I'll use myself as an example because I don't want to, shit on the idea of this.
No, you can shit on it because I'll argue back or whatever, and that's cool. I'll have a debate about it.
Maybe let's use mine anyway because I think I'll be better at tearing it down.
Yeah.
So I really, really, really wanted to demonstrate to people that free will didn't exist inside of a magic routine. But the more I thought about the message, the less sense that it made in that context. So,
I totally agree. I see where you're going, and I totally understand and see what you're saying. But that's why I think that's an art form in itself to balance out. Like, it's so easy to fuck up your magic performance with too much of that narrative thing on top of it. So I feel like it's like that's why I was thinking it's more like hinting at. And that's the key is you got to imply the stuff. But if you say it too directly, then I think that could fuck it up.
So maybe that's right. But even I feel like even hinting at it does not make the point. The best you can do is make people think about it later, and I'm happy with that. That's what I'm doing right now, I think, with this routine. It by nature can't be an argument for... I guess if you're trying to come across as like some kind of guru or some kind of mystic, like real mystic, maybe you can say the self doesn't exist. Watch, I will connect you with the universe. Boop, and you boop them on the nose like a kitten or something, and then they forget their name, and they just call themselves Ogmoth or whatever, like something weird like that. And then you snap your fingers and they come back. Like maybe that's a demonstration.
What I would do, and I haven't written out this script at all, but for that specific one of the self being an illusion, what I would do is demonstrate the person forgetting the name, right? Maybe put them back to sleep. Let's say you have hypnotized them and you put them back into that. I would then explain to the audience, I would say something along the lines of, in the Far East, there are certain Buddhist philosophies that would say that the self is a hallucination, or it's a social construct on some level, right? And then it's like, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going on, but I'm talking about what these people believe, and then they can make that connection and be like, well, wait a minute, maybe it kind of is, because if this guy has the ability to forget his name, right, doesn't that show in a way that it is his beliefs that are creating this thing, not necessarily that it's actually real? I don't know. Like I say, I haven't like sat down and like written this, but I guess what it is, I just like to talk about that kind of shit. And if I can talk about that kind of shit in a magic performance, then I'm going to be, that's cool to me.
Yeah.
And it helps give me ideas.
I don't know if we mentioned this during the re-record, but we were joking earlier about cursing on the air and saying, yeah, it's totally fine, and about how Penguin is doing it. But the joke about Bob Cassidy came up where if they tried to censor all of his stuff, they tried, but there'd just be nothing left. Just be one
he was
long...
drinking on that lecture too, like through the whole thing. Yeah, he brought out some rum or something.
Like the whole thing would just be a dial tone if they tried to censor. Yeah. All right, so I'm sure. Well, okay. So we're getting a hint as to what kind of influences you've had, but I want to hear more about them. So let's talk about the people you read, about the outside of magic influences that you have.
Well, I like to think of myself probably like, trying to be humble, but I like to think of it as like philosophical mentalism is what I'd like to do. Talk about other philosophical ideas in the magic performance. Now, in close-up, I think it's a little bit harder to do that, but in stage, you can write things out to where you can kind of talk about that stuff, or at least hint at it, or use it as inspiration. Maybe you aren't even going to talk about it in the show, but you can use that to give you an idea.
You have more time to think the world.
Yeah, you can use that as a starting point. So I read a lot of crazy-ass fucking philosophy shit, like shit that like nobody else would probably want to read about. Like, I'm really interested in the philosophical pessimism.
I'm going to write that down. Crazy-ass fucking philosophy shit.
Yeah, crazy-ass shit. No, but, like, I like the philosophical pessimism, like Arthur Schopenhauer and Peter Zapfa and Thomas Ligotti. I like those guys because they're so outside of the box, like, outside of what normal people believe in, that I feel like you can only find, uh-oh, is that shit fuck, is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Give us a second. We're gonna make sure that we're all.
Maybe I touched something.
Correct.
I think it's working now.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. There's a little technical difficulty. I'll dip the sound so that people don't get blasted in their ears. But let's go back. So who do you like to read? Crazy ass fucking philosophical shit. That's what people are gonna.
Well, no, I like to read outside the box philosophy, and I think that's there's, really intellectual or self-reflecting people are going to be like interested in needing a philosophy of some kind to help them guide them through their lives. I have a belief that the more self-aware you are, the more you'll probably need to find something to help guide your decisions, like...
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, tell me about that guy, because this reminds me of I can't remember the exact word, but it was distractions or something?
Yes, yeah, that's what Peter Zapfa, he was a Norwegian philosopher, and he was basically in the school of existentialism, but he was a lot more extreme than like Sartre or Nietzsche, because he would argue that they were still trying to find some way to say that life is okay, whenever he was saying he was going to do the more intellectually honest thing and say that being alive is not all right. And that's why he's considered a pessimist, because he would say that our self-awareness or our consciousness is what leads us to almost all of our suffering, or like it's too much for us to bear, right? Like that self-awareness, when it's gotten so big in humans that it made us have desires that nature can't satisfy, that like we'll need to an idea of justice or of religions or something like that, or a meaning to life, a justification for living, that animals don't need that. Or I would say some of the more, maybe not so smart human beings don't need that. They're just guided by whatever comes around. But the more like, self-aware you are, the more you need little things to help, to be distracted by, or
help keep the sanity in.
Or it's like, I don't remember which philosopher said that, but it's like, give me a place to stand, sort of thing. Like, give me something to hold on to so I can figure this stuff out, right?
Right.
And
you need one single truth
yes,
before you can build the world, and the closer you look, the harder it is to find.
Yeah.
Right?
And on one hand, you have the Western philosophers that seem to have been like, okay, we're going to say that reason and logic, and empiricism, those are the things that we're going to use to figure stuff out. And they've been proven right in a lot. I mean, with the scientific method and all that stuff, I mean, you can see that it works. That's a pragmatic thing, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it just works.
Yeah, works equals truth.
Right,
Pragmatism, basically.
But on the other hand, then you got, going back to the Buddhist thing, is they'll be like, yes, that works, but does it really solve the human condition? Like, does it really solve people's existential dread that they have?
You're starting to sound like Jordan Peterson.
Right, yeah.
Like,
yeah, he's another guy I'm interested
There's
in.
another, his unless I'm misunderstanding this, it sounds like he's like a pragmatist, but not in that way, like almost an emotional pragmatist, where it's like, if you feel it, then it's got truth in it. And I think that's his obsession with archetypes.
I think the thing is that what these pessimistic guys, and what Zapfa and Thomas Ligotti in particular,
Thomas Ligotti, that's right.
Yeah, he's actually not really a philosopher. He's written a philosophical book, and he's a short horror story writer. And
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But anyway, he Zapfa and what they're basically trying, their point is I think they're trying to say is that reason and logic and empiricism, if you follow it to its extreme, will take you to the conclusion that there's no justification for being alive whatsoever. If you're going to be intellectually honest, is that there's no justification, and that we actually are in a lot worse of a place than we think we are. And they're also saying, and I'm not saying I even 100% agree with this, but I think it's really good food for thought. They're also saying that oh man, I lost my train of thought there. Yes, that everyday human beings automatically assume that life is a good thing. That's not even a question. If you separate people into optimists or pessimists about the universe, optimists are going to win just by default, just because there's more of them, because they're biologically, programmed to think that way. I mean, nobody ever stopped and to think about it most of the time, so I just think it is stuff to think about. But anyway, how it results in the mentalism thing, how it goes back to that.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle is how it goes back to that. Is since these are really out there ideas that I don't think a lot of people in the magic community, and like not a lot of people in general, but specifically there too, that a lot of people aren't like reading. They aren't like thinking about this and how. And you're talking about determinism in your show, and look, that got a really cool. I've seen that performance of yours, and I thought that was great. And you're talking about, some bigger ideas.
Right.
And I feel like if you're going to find outside the box bigger ideas, even if they're dark, that's even better to me. I mean, I just think it's cool, really, is what it comes down to. I like it.
And that's reflective of your tastes.
Yeah, it's just a taste thing. Right.
That's something that should be ubiquitously said among all magic philosophy, is that, like, there are no rules in this. There's only what is and what is not effective in regard to the goals that you want to achieve, right?
And even your goals are subjective too on some level.
Sure,
like you were saying earlier that magicians are different from like an actor on a stage. I would say, well, kind of in some ways. I think like David Copperfield, Lance Burton, are a little different. Like theirs is, I feel like sometimes the lay people would look at that the same way they would a play in some way.
Yeah,
not completely, but I just think a little bit more than like a street magician or a palm reader or something.
Sure. No, well, definitely, because they're putting it in a narrative theatrical context. But in the same way, like, I'm about to reveal my ignorance about music, but I can see Kiss, bringing like a monster onto stage or something that they fight with their guitars or some shit like that. And, there's a narrative there, too.
I was thinking of War whenever you said that.
Yeah, sure. Or, I saw Disturbed in concert, and they if I remember this correctly, they had a whole execution scene where they put him in an electric chair and he died, right?
Yeah.
And then after he died, he came back and sang this song, right? And it was all very narrative, very cool. And I would view that as...
James Randi, he actually helped Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
And doing magic stuff on...
Toured with Alice Cooper, that's right. And to me, that, Copperfield flying or having, some kind of narrative piece inside of the magic is still very reflective of that. The magician, the musician is still coming out and demonstrating a skill that they possess. And I don't know.
But what skill is David Copperfield presenting other than? I mean, when we're talking about his stage show, I feel like he's actually showing the same skills as an actor would too, in the respect of those wires holding him up isn't a skill that he's doing.
No, the skill he's presenting is... Dude, don't tell them they're wires.
Oh, God.
This is public. Yeah. This is publicly available.
Yeah. Oops, I guess I shouldn't.
I don't think he just blew anyone's mind. Well, the skill he's demonstrating is flying, right? I mean, at the very least, he's demonstrating deception, the ability to deceive, and at the very most, he's demonstrating the ability to levitate.
I know. I guess it's just because he's not the one really doing it, is what I'm thinking.
Sure, no, I get that.
But that's only because I know the method, though. So I guess it is different.
As far as like the relationship of an actor, yes, there are stagecraft skills that magicians need. I can't remember how we got on this topic.
Sometimes I'm gonna say this really quick though. Honestly, like sometimes when I'm talking to you, like outside of this and stuff, every time we have a conversation, man, one thing you're really good at is you're really good at like the Socratic method. I feel like maybe not like intentionally, but you're one of those guys that'll be like, oh, hold on a second, let me think about that because I haven't thought about that specific area of that argument before.
Well, thank you.
That's a good. Yeah, I'm giving you a compliment because I'll be like, okay, I think I got something figured out here. This is a bulletproof argument, and I like whenever people will get me to think of it in a different way because I feel like we get so stuck in our views that it's a very good thing for somebody to come in and just ask a question, not say, oh, you're wrong, but just ask a question. You'll be like, oh, hold on a second, let me go research that.
Right, because sometimes you just need a good jostling to get it out of your head. Because the thing that always comes to my mind when I'm considering it, ultimately, I should say this, ultimately it doesn't fucking matter, right? I mean, like whether it's an art form or a craft, whether it's a play or whether you're a comedian, what the relationship is. Ultimately, if it's working for you, it works, and there will always be people who have a different set of rules that they live by, and you can still call it magic, right? Right. But my question, this is always the example that I give, on Broadway. And man, I have no idea how we got on this tangent. So if we can back this up at some point, to remember where we were, because we're way off path.
I know, but I think it's actually better if we just fucking.
Hey, buddy.
If we just shoot the shit.
You're here. What do you have to say? No? All right. All right. That was your chance, man. That was your chance. So
I feel like we'll naturally get back on topic.
Yeah, we will. We will. The importance of a script, ladies and gentlemen, so that you can leave and then come back. That's what this unscripted nonsense does. We should have scripted this.
Yeah, scripted it.
So the example I always bring up when it comes to what is a magician, what is the relationship to the audience is Beauty and the Beast. I use this example every time in this conversation because I think it's perfect. It's a musical theater piece, and not the movie. I'm talking about the Broadway show. At the end of the show, there is a magic trick. It is a phenomenal magic trick embedded in a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Right. It's a quick change basically, and I may be remembering this more generously than than the reality. But the beast levitates up into the air, and then swirls around in some cloths, and comes down a prince, comes down a human. And okay, so now that that's happened, do we recognize this as a magic show? Right? And that's always the question I have, is like, when we're comparing this to other things, if we're going to say that, like, you know, maybe people watch Copperfield like they watch a play, okay, well then, is the play a magic show if it's got special effects in it? Or is Copperfield a play and not a magician? Is Copperfield an actor and not a magician? Like, ultimately, I think it doesn't matter, but that's, like, where's the balance?
To get back to the Buddhist thing, is they would say that this is what happens whenever you take words too seriously. You know, whenever you
Maybe
take...
that's my ultimate problem.
Well, yeah, whenever you say, like, you know, whenever you use names and words and things like that, we think they're a lot more solid than they actually are. So, like, to say, okay, that's a play, well, it can't... I mean, sometimes maybe it's a play with a magic trick in it. You know, it's both.
Right.
It's, like, somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
Because they just call them special effects, you know, and I mean, man, maybe this is just the ultimate snake eating its own tail that's just going to eventually. This is the hill I die on.
It just is what it is, man.
maybe. So it's an interesting conversation though, and you know, like I said, ultimately it doesn't matter, but I think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Well, and also, you know, another thing is I also think it's like shit or get off the pot on some stuff. It's like, dude, just at some point, if you can't make up your mind about your philosophical reasoning of what's right or what's wrong and what's a magic trick and what's not, just do it if you enjoy it and try your best not to hurt somebody with it. Like, on some level, it's like, I agree with the whole not wanting to sell yourself as the real thing in the respect of talking to the dead, just because that has the potential to really cause some damage to people. Right. You know? But Uri Geller, who's bending spoons, yeah, he's not, I mean, he's saying it's real, and it's like, yeah, he's not correct in saying that. But how much damage do you think it's actually doing to people? It might be doing damage, but not nearly to the extent that talking to the dead is. So I kind of like weigh it out.
Oh, sure. I guess, you know, I mean, the ultimate... Everyone's got their different levels of worry and concern about that. So, disclaimers. We had a conversation about that recently, and you know, it's what's your view on disclaimers, just so that everyone hears.
I just don't have one anymore, dude. I just don't have one anymore. I just do this stuff, and
we're not going to debate that here. We've already done it. So, yeah. Yeah. So you heard it from Watkins. No disclaimer. No disclaimer for him.
I never said pro or con.
Like, you don't have
for
one.
or
That's
against
all you said.
it. I don't have one, and maybe I should.
Sure. You know, I think the ultimate concern that I have when it comes to theater and magic and how magic is being treated right now is that, and it all gets summed up in this sentence: magicians want to create a compelling story. And when I say story, I mean, you know, literally a narrative oftentimes, but sometimes it's like it can be a narrative, but story is just as easily, you know, the way that you're moving is a story. You know, the way that you hold something is a story. Do I hold it like this or like this? You know, we were talking about American Psycho, and I haven't seen it. I know that you hate me for that, but I know the business card scene. And those business cards, even though they all kind of look the same, to that person, they tell a different story. Right. You know, who is this person that has this business card, right? Yeah. So magicians want to tell a compelling story. But for me, when I see a magic show, 95, maybe 98% of all magic shows I see proves to me this point that magicians can barely tell a clear story. Yeah. And I mean, I'm trying to work on that. Like, you can see in that script I sent you, I'm trying to, like, be a little bit better at this type of stuff. Yeah, there are whenever I hear somebody talk about story in their works, in their books or whatever, I just switch the word to stagecraft in my mind, because that's what people really need. Yeah. But I think, honestly, I've seen you perform, and there are some things you can do better, but like you're on the right track there. Yeah. Like, the stories that you're telling are very clear, and this is something that I wanted to talk to you about, because you're very good at empathizing. Oh, cool. You're very good at oh, cool. That's cool. Yeah, that's all right. No, you're good at empathizing, because you know when you can feel. You tell me about this though, because I have this conversation with some people, but I think you can feel when you're losing your audience. Yes. And I think that and I actually know this about you, is that you test your work.
Yeah.
So some people who, well, tell me about that. So what's your process?
All right.
Because I want to know about the process. Because you're coming up with really weird stuff.
Yeah. First, you come up with some weird stuff. That's the first step.
First step. Step
come
one.
up with some
hold
weird
on. How do you
stuff.
come up with weird stuff?
By reading, weird philosophical stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take an example of like what we were talking about. I haven't written one for this, but of the guy like forgetting his name, like, and then I would take a trick that's already been around, okay, or a basic mentalism plot. Mm-hmm. You're thinking of something, I'm gonna guess what it is, okay? How can I take that? Okay. Here we go. Let me start over again, because I found out, I actually thought about this before, of like, how would I explain what I'm trying to do in the simplest way possible? I feel like at least you could call it mentalism or bizarre magic or bizarre mentalism is how I would see it. I see it as making the subjective objective. That's what I'm trying to do. To make it seem as though thoughts or images in somebody's mind or thoughts or emotions are a physical substance. In some way, right? That's kind of what I mean whenever I'm saying, like...
Wait, are you talking about a particular routine, or are you talking
I'm
about
talking
a general
all of my
philosophy?
all of my routines, and in a general philosophy, but all the things that I've come up with, I feel like that's kind of the goal I have in mind, is to see it in a different angle. Instead of seeing it as a psychic thing, see it as a... okay, let me give you an idea. If you're going to do... Fraser Parker's change of beliefs thing. I'm not going to reveal the method because it's not mine.
But you give us a rundown of it.
But what I would do
let us know what it looks like first.
Oh, basically you would ask somebody if they believe in God, or you could do it with colors, their favorite color, anything like that. Ask them if they believe in God, and then through some sort of hypnotic-esque process, you would change their belief. Right? Okay. And then you'd ask them again, and then they would say, no, I don't, or yes, I did, depending on what they said.
And if people are interested, that's Fraser Parker.
Yeah, it's in True Mysteries.
True Mysteries.
But what I mean is, like, I would take this, if you're going to try to go outside the box and turn it into, like, a more of a bizarre, weird thing, you could take a delight right after let's say you asked them if they believed in God, and they say yes. Tell them to close their eyes, show your hands empty, go behind their head and take out a light with using a delight and putting it in like your pocket or your suitcase somewhere. And then you show your hands again empty. Then you'll do the process. Then they say they don't believe in God anymore. So through the implication, it's like you were literally taking out their mystical ideas. And it's this shining light thing. It's very fantasy, like almost ridiculously mystical stuff that's like completely unbelievable. But I like the idea of making the subjective objective. Or like, for instance, I think I had one in that Jhana book. Yeah, I think it was in there. Where I was talking about if you're going to read someone's mind or take a thought from their head, what if whenever you did that, they also had amnesia about it? Like you literally took the thought out of their head. Not just that you're able to read their mind, but you stole a thought and you were able to reveal it, and they didn't have it in their head anymore. Almost like you could actually take that physical thought out of their head.
Is that the routine where you're doing a pin code?
I do that. I do the same thing with the pin code, yeah.
Okay.
But I also did it with somebody's friend's name too, and I tried to build as if they forgot who their friend was. Like I say, I was talking about instead of just forgetting the name, and make it imply like you stole that memory from their head. You know, as if it was a physical thing, and that's the best way I could put it. Make the subjective objective in some way is what.
Interesting. So that's
kind
of
my process.
Okay, so that's cool. I mean, that's an interesting lens through which to view new material. So you read a trick, you think, oh, that's cool, you know, I'm going to do a creative exercise. How can I make this bring
that's
this
the
more
exercise,
into the real
I guess
world?
what I'm trying to say. At least it gives you a place to start. It's like, how can I make this into an objective thing or something that you can do there? So then and even if you don't like that stage, at least it gives you something to start thinking outside the box.
Right, because sometimes many listeners will just be in a position where, oh, they've got an idea, but some people won't, and they'll, you know, eventually you'll just start coming up with these ideas. But if you're trying to come up with ideas, maybe this is a good place to start. So after you've got you've got an idea. Right, and you
I should have said this other thing too, and I've wrote this in the books too, is if you're going to try to write or come up with ideas every morning during that time, I haven't done it in a while though, but during that time I would get up and write down 5 ideas a day, even if they're shit. Just write down all the ideas you get right when you wake up and then forget about it, and then do that every morning. And if you get into a routine of doing that, you're not only coming up with a lot of ideas, which are stacking the odds in your favor that you're going to get a good one, but you're also training that area of your mind, that creative area. So then what happened to me, at least, and what I would assume would happen to everybody else, is that after you've done that, and if you forget about it, you just do it in the morning, write it down, forget about it, that part of your mind will start working, and you'll be at work or something, or just going about your daily routine, and then you'll be like, oh, wait a minute, this is what you could do this, and you'll have a whole new idea naturally, without any effort, just because you worked that in the back of your mind. It's just sitting there. And you just give it time, and do it more like you're fishing, not like you're hunting. You want to put the net out there and let the ideas come. Don't force yourself to do it. That's the other thing. Like, if you just write down the ideas without too much judgment, and not trying to say, oh, I must come up with an idea right now, because then you're going to get tired and you're not going to do it. You get frustrated.
Sure.
So just be kind of cool with yourself. Fucking assume that you're going to come up with something good at some point.
Okay.
Make that assumption.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing too, is doing that, and then I collect all the biggest ones, or the ones that I thought were the best or had the most potential, and then I would type them out. And I noticed that whenever I'm writing a script, I don't think about it. As soon as I start typing, things just kind of come to my head, and then you can go back and edit it. And then I'll edit that. Then I'll take it, practice it how I imagine it would work, go out and perform it on some people and get video, see how they reacted, and then watch the video and say, oh, this probably isn't going to work. It works in theory, but it's not going to work right here. That's the really weird thing, is that there's a lot of stuff that can work theoretically, but whenever you actually take it out in the real world, it's just not. There's no reason it shouldn't, but people you're dealing with human beings, so they're going to do things wrong. They're not going to understand what you're saying. Darwin Ortiz in that book Strong Magic says, your spectators are smart when you want them to be stupid, and they're stupid when you want them to be smart. And I think a lot lot of forget that. It is so true, man. Like, if you want them to do a math trick, if you're doing a math trick, they will not be able to add 2 plus 2, or just something simple, because you're kind of putting them on the spot. But then again, if you're trying to palm a card off, then all of a sudden they're able to, see that quickly, So it's like, I don't know why it's that way, but that's just how it is, and that's why you got to take it out. Try it out, see if it works. And whenever it does and you got it good, go back and type it up again, and then go out and do it again and then type it. I just do that a bunch of times over and over again until I'm like, all right, this thing works pretty good.
So it's like a inward spiraling circle to eventually reach the center of the target.
Yeah.
Right?
And what you understand once you do that, too, is that especially if you're trying to write a book, is that you have to mention the things that work sometimes. Because I noticed in mentalism, and I'm not going to throw out any names really, but there's a lot of books that will be like, oh, this is my new technique for doing this, and it's 90% foolproof, or whatever they say like that. Or they just make it seem like this is a technique that will work, but then when you go out, it's like it just doesn't work, and then everybody blames them, saying, oh, you're not doing it right. But here's my question. This is my challenge to those people, those creators, is how come you never put any videos up, dude? Like, if you're going to sell something that's not 100% foolproof, I would expect you to put some videos of the best of your ability, to get some videos of it working and showing people freaking out and whatever. And yes, they could still pre-show it and be sneaky like that, but at least just put that effort in there. Because, dude, there's so many mentalism books out, and rarely do they have videos for every routine.
Yeah.
Why not? It's because I think they know that it doesn't work all the time.
Well, you've got, and that's something that you've put out too, is videos. All your routines have videos on YouTube, right?
I think there's one that doesn't have a video, and that's one that I felt was like it's something that's, one of them, it's not practical to have a video for, because it works like days later. That's a whole different thing.
Oh, sure.
But then the other one was like, the other one in there is like, to me, it's like, first of all, it was my least, I think it's going to be everybody's least favorite thing in there. It was just an idea I had that maybe somebody could run with, and that's why I like to have a collection in the book, because there's going to be some in there that you're like, oh, I don't really like that, but maybe I'll get back to it and think about it later on and come up with something. But as long as I'll find one thing in a book, then I'm happy, or a couple things or whatever. But like the only other trick that I put out that doesn't have a video with it was one in Positive Negative that, like I say, it wasn't really my favorite. It's one that it's gonna work. I mean, it's based off shit that's worked so much in the past that whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's only 2 that don't have videos, and one of those is because it was impractical to get a video.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Well,
it.
yeah, because it's days later.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I mean, really, that's the most important thing to me, is that what you're doing is you're coming up with these ideas, and they're crazy ideas, but you, outside of, as opposed to many other people that I've seen who use this kind of material or come up with these kind of ideas, you really do bounce it back and forth between real world presentations and the script room, the writing process. You go back and forth between rehearsal, presentations, and reworking, editing. And that's so important, because I see so many of those types of routines that appear to be, oh, it's going to change someone's life. Oh, your mentalism's going to be, you're going to be mind-blowing. You're going to be able to reveal somebody's most inner thoughts and all of this.
First of all, it's not the tricks that do any of that. And that's the other thing, is they sell it as if the trick is like going to sell itself.
Right.
And I do not agree with that at all.
Right. And the other negative aspect of that is that, like, when you do on rare occasions see a video of this kind of thing, they're showing you the best take that they've got.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah.
And it looks a lot like confusion to me.
Some of it, yeah, that I agree on that. But also, if that's their best take that they got, and that's the reaction you got, it's not worth the time.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, that's not really.
Well, one of the reasons I think maybe they don't show video is because most of the time, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, which is, if they're not using tried and true methods, then usually they're using something propless or some kind of psych force or something like that. And it's verbal. What they're selling you is the script, not like a prop or something that you can hide in your hand or anything. And so if they show you a video, they're going to be naturally releasing the method, right?
Yeah, I would say that, but here's the... Yes, and that's the bad thing about it. It's like, on one hand, it's like they can't show you the full unedited video, because then you'd figure it out or whatever. Maybe you can backtrack and figure out the scripting or whatever, and they are selling the script. But on the other hand, I feel like there is sort of a need for the video. So what do you do? I don't know what to do, other than I'm not anti-propless. I'm not anti any of those types of methods either, even if they are like that, because I do see it as like it's getting better and better every time they put it out. And I think that they might be on their way to something big. Like, I think personally, I really liked Peter Turner's new Isabella Star 3. I thought that he's on to something there. Like, it's getting better and better every time. Like, I personally was not a fan of that first Isabella Star that he put out there. I mean, there's a lot of like math and all that crap, and then.
Well, I know you're a fan of combining the propless techniques with more tried and true methods, and I see a lot of that in Positive Negative, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But just to give an example, because I know everyone's got, or if you look into this material at all, you've got examples, and I have a friend who we were working on something. I think Warren will get that. Sorry, folks. Hey, Warren.
This is a real studio, just so everybody
This is a real
knows.
studio. Yeah, it's not totally not an apartment. Is that food? All right, I'll cut that. That was probably Stacy. But so, it's Stacy. Stacy's back, everyone. So
that's the studio hand.
That's the studio hand. Yeah. But yeah. So what was I saying? Everyone's got their story of this, but mine is like, I got really amped up for this one method that me and a friend were working on. That's a propless method of guessing a name. You're guessing 2 letters, right? Once you got the first 2 letters, you can kind of guess at the name, right? And that's the whole idea. But I realized that, like, we were using this sort of binary system and this principle of saying a bunch of letters, and then they say whether they did or did not hear the letter inside of that group. And I love the idea, and if you know the routine, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, then you don't. No big deal. But I realized one day I was counting the letters as he was practicing it for me, and we were both totally stoked on this because it's impossible for you to know. I mean, it's impossible for you to know, right? But it's so possible in memory because I'm sitting there listening to him say these letters, and then at the end when he's like, "And did you hear the letter there?" I go, 36, and he goes, "What?" And I'm like, 36 letters. That's how many letters you just said to me. Like, 36 letters is more letters than there are letters. You know, and the layperson's memory is just like, you're saying 36 letters to me, and I'm saying yes and no. Like, I don't... It is logically deceptive on paper.
Yeah.
But you gotta know what they're thinking.
Here's the other thing. A little criticism of that specific routine, too, is that is a propless one that you could have had on video, too. That you would not have been able to backtrack, really. And get the method.
Right.
So there's no excuse for not having a video for that one. Oops.
Right. Oop. It's good. Okay.
Yeah. No, but yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess, like, when it comes to some of those other propless name guesses, I can understand not putting a video up. But, like, with that one, if it works, then they could have got a video of that, and nobody would have been able to figure it out.
Right. And, I mean, we've brainstormed a couple of ways to make this better, and we've actually come up with some really cool ideas for a stage version of this and getting the cue in a different way, which doesn't take, an hour and a half.
Man, just write it down on a piece of paper,
yeah,
man.
That's true. That's true. You're right.
Just like, dude, dude, if you aren't willing to bring a piece of paper and a pencil with you, like if you're talking about pocket space, dude, I got pieces of paper right here in a pen in my right there.
They're always with you.
That's not a prop.
Well, we were talking about this the other day. Watkins attended a show that I did at the Merchandise Museum, which is down on East 4th Street in Manhattan. And I ended with a Q&A, with a jazz Q&A from Cassidy, but fourth dimensional telepathy inside of it, right? And the big thing is, but they write it down, but they write it down, but they write it down. But Watkins, you were telling me, what did people say on the way out? Because everyone knows.
Yes. At the very end, you did the drawing duplication back to back.
Yeah.
And some of the people that worked there and some of the other audience members were walking out, and they were saying, man, I could, they were like, I can maybe try my best to figure out everything else in the show, but how could he have gotten that drawing? Because he was drawing it right there, right in front of us, and his back was to him. There's no way that he could have done that. They completely forgot that he had drawn that picture earlier, and put it in an envelope. That just was completely disappeared from their mind.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's better to have them write it down, but then use these propless or kind of techniques to make them just make the billets invisible or seem unnecessary.
Sure.
That to me is just as good as not writing it down at all.
So tell me about positive negative.
Yeah, that one's
that's your most recent.
Yeah, most recent.
Are there hard copies still available? I know it sold a bunch right away.
Yeah, there's still quite a bit. I think I got 40 left of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I got quite a bit of them left, and then that one, the theme is you got positive, inspiring, happy kinds of mentalism stuff, and then you got this sort of darker, more negative routines in there.
Sure.
You got one where you can tell somebody the day and month that they're going to die, and they'll know it's true, and they'll believe you. And that, like I say, this is more of a thought exercise, that half of the book.
Right.
Some of it I'm okay with performing, and I advocate, I think it's okay to do these, but that one's going to be one that's it's up to you if you want to be unethical with it or not.
Yeah, I remember reading a big scary introduction where you're I don't know if you should perform these. They might not be ethical.
You know where the idea... Here's where the idea...
Spooky magic.
Yeah, the idea that got me thinking about it is...
for you, Andrew.
I remember when I first had the idea to even write this whole book is I'm a big fan of watching weird movies, like David Lynch stuff, and just surreal movies, and whenever you're into that sort of thing, and you're looking for underground movies that maybe nobody's really heard of, you could come across some pretty scary stuff. I came across this movie that was called August Underground, and it is the most vulgar stuff. I mean, it's a bad one. It's a found footage style, kind of Blair Witch kind of style, and it's a horror movie, or it's supposed to be. And it was actually made by these guys in New Jersey that are they're a company that specializes in horror special effects, you know, and like making things look real and stuff like that. So they made this movie to showcase their ability.
Oh, I see.
To show, so it's more like a promotional thing. And there's an interesting story about it is that basically the movie, like I say, it's found footage, so it's really crappy VHS style, and it's supposedly like the home movies of these 2 serial killers, right?
Okay.
So it's bad, dude.
Sounds brutal.
It's brutal, but it's made by these guys who own this little company, and they were going to take it to a film festival in Canada. And I think I remember reading that they got stopped at the border, and that the police thought that this was real snuff videos, like, because it was the guy in the video bringing it, because he made the movie, and that they had to.
Do you think
explain.
that really happened?
That's what it says on like Wikipedia.
Oh, that would be
yeah.
I mean, if that happened, that's great. That's amazing. And if it didn't, what an amazing publicity stunt.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But it led me to start thinking. I was like, okay, these guys. Why do we like horror stuff in the first place? Like, why are we interested in seeing this fake bad shit? You know, because hopefully almost everybody agrees that serial killers are fucked up and bad.
Yeah.
But why would we even have any urge or that what would you call that? I'm trying to think of the word. Like that morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, it's like, because these guys are trying to be if you're going to be a horror movie maker, right? If you like to make horror stuff or even horror story writing, you would want to make it be as true to that intention as possible in some way. So I started thinking, if you were a real mind reader, what kind of stuff would you do? You would do good stuff, some people would, and then you'd have some people doing bad stuff. So I started thinking, I want to write a book that's based on all the bad stuff that a mentalist would do, and make routines that would be like, what would an unethical mentalist, a real mind reader do? He would, and I have an effect in there, he would not only would he steal read someone's mind to get their PIN code, but he would also try to make them forget it. You know, literally steal it from their head. That's what I would imagine a real mind reader might do.
Right.
You know, he would, and then you have the other kind of unethical, like, which would be telling people when they're going to die. You know, that's a dark-sided one, and it's one that I feel it would be an unethical thing to do. So it's, like I say, it's a thought exercise, and so I'm not saying that you should perform them. I just put them out there, just so it's out there, and you know, because if it's worth knowing at least.
Well, I should say that it's worth having the book. I'm not getting a cut of the sales, I promise. But there's a routine in there that I use now quite frequently, and this is, to me, it's one of my favorite ideas that you've had.
Dude, I think combining that with that jazz Q&A was the coolest. That's the best idea ever.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. So
that worked. I went and watched that video again. I went and watched that. I showed it to Richard Torres last night.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I was like, look, this is the part where he did the challenge card thing.
Yeah. So we'll basically explain the concept. It's because I know a lot of magicians, mentalists listening to this or watching this would be interested in hearing it. But he goes into greater detail. But the idea is basically that the presentation is you get a blank face pack of cards and all of the, or even on your business cards, and you write questions on the backs of them. And you know, what's my mother's maiden name? Is my baby going to be a boy or a girl? Do you know my PIN number? All of these questions, and the premise is these are questions that I receive as a psychic, right? And we were talking about Propolis, and this is a perfect example of combining a very popular method in Propolis with a prop to add a degree of separation between the performance and the method.
Yeah.
Right? And so tell us about challenge cards. Tell us about that 1/3 phase of that routine. Because I think people will really, really dig it.
And the cool thing about it is not only does it separate it adds a layer of deception as far as making that Propolis thing a lot more hidden, you know, but it also adds an additional logical disconnect in the fact that they don't even know how you would have known which card they picked in the first place. You see?
Yeah.
So like if you I'll just say like like one of them was
let's not be coy.
Was a star sign.
We can say the word progressive anagram. I don't think public is. Well, I mean we're over an hour into this. The public's not going to have made it this far. But thanks for hanging in there, magicians.
Yeah.
But this is all worth it right here. Progressive anagrams. The problem is, of course, is there an H? Is there an O? Is there a K? Yes, no, yes, no. Oh, okay. You said a bunch of letters.
Hey, you know what? Now that I think about it, I wonder if you could try to make that one that we were talking about earlier that routine where you name 36 letters. You could
yeah.
probably even theoretically try to squeeze that out of it with this too and make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
so that might help too. Now
Challenge
that I
cards
think about it.
challenge cards to me could and should be applied at the beginning of every Propolis piece.
Why not? Yeah,
because,
why
like,
not?
There's no reason not to make it seem like you don't know the question.
Yes,
That helps all of it, no matter what. So we're still kind of being coy here. I'm going to just put it out flat. You're going to force cards on somebody that have questions that you have previously written, which are supposedly questions that you get asked frequently as a psychic entertainer or as a mind reader. And the one that we're talking about in particular, and this is only 1/3 of a larger routine, which is quite a genius routine, but the one we're talking about is reveal my zodiac sign. Or that was my take on it, but guess my zodiac sign. And if you do a progressive anagram, especially if you do the raise anagram for zodiac signs, which is Turner's?
No, that's an older one.
It's an older one.
Yeah, I don't
Turner
know
uses it, right?
Yeah, he started using it again.
RAISE are the letters. You can work it out yourself if you want, but it's in Turner's work and apparently some older stuff. You're forcing that question on them. They're picking a question and then making it apply to themselves. So rather than just saying to them, so basically this solves the problem of them knowing that you know the category of answer that their answer is going to be in.
Yeah, because for all they know, that you might think that they're thinking of a name or anything in the world,
Right.
So
you force this question, and this is, I'm explaining it, but this is Watkins' idea. So they get this question, what's your zodiac sign? And now they keep it to themselves. So you don't know what the question is, supposedly. And so when you start asking them about letters, when you start asking them to focus on the spelling of the answer, it's just so disconnected at that point that who cares if you guess incorrectly about one of the letters? They have no idea that you know the question.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's
you
genius.
had that cool
Worth the price of
addition.
the book.
You had that addition too that you used in the show. Where he said, "Oh no, that's in the question."
Right.
I love that part too.
This is cool. In that progressive
and
anagram,
for whenever you went down to 2, you said, "Oh, that was for the other guy who wrote it."
So for me, I used basically the same 3-phase routine that Watkins puts out in Positive Negative for these, but I forced them during a Q&A at a show. And
in the Q&A,
inside the Q&A, right? So I load these ones in and pull out these 3 questions and hand them to 3 people in the audience. One of them is reveal my zodiac sign. One of them is
childhood memory.
Yeah, a childhood memory that I'm having, and then one of them is another one, reveal my PIN code. We won't get into those 2, but Watkins does a very good job of explaining that kind of stuff in the book. But basically, the zodiac sign, when you have to do. If you write it as reveal my zodiac sign, then all of the letters in the raise are in there. So you can say, whenever you get the wrong letter, you can say, "Oh no, that was in the question, right?" And they'll say, "Yes, that was in the question because that letter is."
So
in the
now
question.
they don't think that you were asking anything about the sign,
right?
At all.
There's at no point have you been wrong. And now it's just a little joke, but we've all seen this sort of Darren ploy where you're down to 2 options. You look at someone in the eyes and you say, "Okay, this is your zodiac sign, right?" And you look at them and you just say, "Okay, just say the answer in your mind over and over again, like Virgo, 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 Virgo." And of course, if they react, then that's the one. And if they don't react, then you have to kind of sidestep that moment and be like, "But yours is a Scorpio, right?" Or, "But your sign is a Scorpio," or "Your sign is a Scorpio." But for me, in that context, it was very fun because that question was supposedly written by someone else in the room in that moment, right? And so when I got the Virgo thing wrong, I just was able to say,
that was for the person who wrote the question. So and remember, I think we should also make it clear is that these are questions. These 3 challenge questions came out of the bowl that everybody had written in the audience had written questions. So everybody assumes that those questions that you pulled out were written by somebody else in the audience.
Right. And so
there's a whole world of great ideas that you could use with that.
Yeah.
That PIN code one is that's so awesome. Man.
I can already tell that it's stirring up in your mind for that. A lot of good came out of that. It came out of putting those in there, but that was just.
I would say that PIN code reveal right there was like the best part of that whole Q&A. And if you watch the video again, that's where everybody was really applauding right there,
cool.
Because it looked like, think about it, imagine a Q&A where you could take out a question out of the bowl, hand it to somebody, and it says, guess my PIN code, and you are able to guess it right then and there.
Yeah.
No peaks or anything like that.
Yeah. That was a great effect with a simple method. And those methods are described in positive, negative, just so everyone knows. So that's a full-fledged 3-phase routine, which uses that basic principle in in the way we already described, but then 2 more very clever ways. And so much good material in this book. I can't recommend it enough, especially for somebody who's, I mean, if you've got a creative mind, you'll appreciate the work in there, and it'll spark your creativity. And if you want to get more creative, that's a great example of stuff you can do. So, a good example of creative thinking. Yeah.
Oh.
You got some pumpkin ale.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Okay. So, I mean, we'll just put this in before the end because we shut the microphones off. We did an outro, and now all of a sudden we're talking about really interesting stuff again. Yeah. So
and now I completely forgot what I was going to say again.
No, you were talking about
No, I was just going to. We were talking about creativity.
No, you were talking about. I said that I really enjoyed the fishing and not hunting thing, and you were talking about David Lynch. And you said that.
He has David Lynch is a director and writer for these movies. You probably have seen them. Eraserhead, Blue Velvet. Have you ever seen any of his stuff?
I think I've seen Eraserhead, but it was probably a long time ago.
Oh, it's great stuff. My favorite filmmaker of all time, man.
David Lynch.
Yes, love it. He did Twin Peaks.
You hear that from Watkins. Check out David Lynch.
Yeah, highly recommend it. In fact, David Lynch can do no wrong in my point of view, but he's also a big, he can do a little bit of wrong because he's a big into that transcendental meditation stuff, and I don't know if you know what that is, but it's fucking cult, man. but it is. You know, the Beatles brought that guy. I don't remember what his name was. Some guy from India started this they call it TM, and it's this meditation technique that all of the elite, like Hollywood, really rich celebrities and actors are all big into, and it costs a fortune to like learn these mantras and stuff. I mean, it's like Scientology level scam, right? And that's why it's really weird to me that like David Lynch is big into it. He has his own, like, it's the David Lynch Foundation. Like, he's like, it's like his charity thing where he's teaching it to kids and stuff like that. Now, maybe in his point of view, he likes the technique. Maybe he doesn't agree with the way that they charge like that much for people. Because really, there's nothing wrong with trying to learn a meditative thing if that's your deal. Yeah. But anyway, that's fucking way off topic. Fucking David Lynch, he uses meditation. He uses that TM stuff to come up with ideas. And he wrote this book called Catching the Big Fish, which is kind of what got me to think in that term of like, fishing, not hunting. He doesn't say that, but that's how I see it. And he calls it like meditating. You can sit there and just let these ideas come to you. And sometimes you'll get a little one. And whenever you grab that, then it's almost like you can lure the bigger and bigger fish coming to you. You have to go deeper into the water, So that's what and when you watch his movies and his shows and everything he does, you know that this guy is meditating and seeing some crazy shit in his head, man. Sure. But it's good. It's good stuff. And that's what I think along the same lines. I don't sit and meditate, but I sit and think,
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you have to relax. There's no pressure.
I mentioned, that's something else. I mentioned in positive and negative. I think one of my philosophical ideas for myself, is I think that there's a big, obviously, is that there's this big division between Eastern and Western philosophy, and like how everybody's like, oh, Eastern philosophy is crazy, mystical stuff. No, man, I think that we should like combine these things, because you can find so much good stuff whenever you look at both sides of the whole deal, and I could talk about that for a long time. But
maybe that'll be another.
The Buddhist guys back in the day, they say whenever a person sits down to try to meditate or whatever they're doing, that they have what's called the 5 hindrances to meditation, which is sense desire, ill will or anger, restlessness, and sloth and torpor, laziness, right? And then the last one was doubt, right? Or like, not really doubt, but just kind of like, questioning yourself and, being self-conscious or whatever. And he said, and they would say, get rid of those, and then you'll be able to get to this really good, relaxed state. So I say, instead of doing that for a meditation thing, do that when you're writing down your ideas. Do their process that they have written out in these old fucking sutras or whatever of how to get just one of the things that the Buddha would say to do, and when you read like the Pali Canon, and he's talking about these 5 hindrances, he would say, like, give yourself permission to let those go for a very specific amount of time. And that's a really good psychological technique. It's like saying, okay, I know I question myself a lot. I got anxiety. I probably suck at things. I know I think that way of myself. I'm self-critical.
Right.
So for the next 30 minutes when I'm writing these things down, I'm going to put that stuff aside. I will allow it to come back to me after that. And I feel like that's really useful. Yeah. And you can do that when you're doing your show, too. You could say, hey, look, I know I got a lot of anxiety and self-criticism, but I'm just going to allow that to come back to me after I'm done performing.
Now, that sounds like something that somebody really couldn't necessarily have control over, even if they were to just say those words. But do you think the power comes from saying those words? That just simply saying them?
Like I say, it's a psychological trick that you can use for yourself. It's like a little life hack type of thing. And I know what you mean. I think that we do have a little bit more control than we think we do. I don't think we have total control over that. But I think just saying that to yourself and saying, look, because here's the deal is that it's admitting that you don't have control over it. It's saying that I know I'm going to think this way. I'm just not going to do it for right now. And if one of those thoughts comes in, I'm granting myself permission not to identify with it or just to like block it off for now.
A little bit like when you have, like I know some people have high anxiety, and when they don't notice that they're getting into sort of physical nervous states, right? Then it can escalate quickly. But if they notice that they're doing it, then... So
that's what they would call mindfulness, or just being self-aware. When you're self-aware, you get a lot more control over your emotions. But it doesn't, like I say, I'm not saying you have complete control over it. But when you notice what you're doing, you know you get that little tiny instance of choice, like that little tiny millisecond of a choice of how you're going to react to it. You know.
Well, now we have to talk about free will.
Yeah. Some other times.
Even whether it's an illusion or not, is a pragmatic thing, right? If it works, then
Right. Whether it's an illusion, we're all gonna. Whatever your stance on that, we're all walking around like we believe in free will. So
I think the only thing that gives you free will is if you believe in free will, right? It's kind of like once you stop believing in free will, then you'll notice that you don't have it, and you'll give up. You become a defeatist.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I'm saying this in the like a very pessimistic sense. It's like, let's say that you're addicted to drugs, right?
Yeah.
If you start saying, well, I don't have free will, this is a chemical imbalance and it's something I have zero control over, you've pretty much, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in some way. But the illusion of free will and the belief in that is a pragmatic tool of at least getting off of it. And if you do end up getting off of it, you've kind of in a way disproven, at least in a really weird way, you've shown that it is real by believing in it. And I'm not saying it is, I'm saying that the belief makes it so in some weird fucking way. Now you could say that was determined too, and that's why I always say that how can you believe in determinism without going crazy, man?
Well, I maybe you can't.
Yeah.
So let's do the outro again. I really had to use the bathroom, so we had to cut that anyway. But I was going too fast. But just let's hear it. Where can we find you? Where can we support you? Where can we ask questions? Because I know that people are going to have a lot of questions. Maybe we'll get comments on the YouTube video. Maybe we'll get questions in our inbox. So where do we contact you?
Website, watkinsmentalism.com. Email is watkinsmentalism@gmail.com. YouTube is watkinsmentalism. And if you would like to buy the book, you would just email me at watkinsmentalism@gmail.com. There you go.
That's how underground it is.
Yeah.
You got to email some guy
to buy the book.
It's not anywhere else. I wanted all of the profits for myself. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. I think that's our GoPro battery running out of life, but good to see you, man. Great first studio recording.
There we go.
Thanks for coming in.
Dope.